Spider-Man. For decades, Marvel's flagship superhero has grossed billions of dollars worldwide and redefined the superhero movie genre as we know it. But there was a time when the cinematic history of the web-headed wonder could have been drastically different, told by a studio notorious for B-movie entertainment. This is the story of Canon Spidey. We'll begin our story here, deep in the chaotic jungles of Los Angeles at the headquarters of the infamous Canon Film Group. Two Israeli cousins, Menahem Golan and Yoram Globus, purchased the struggling film company from its previous owners and brought it to worldwide prominence. Their business model was simple: purchase B-grade scripts for next to nothing, attach a star, quite possibly some ninjas, and immediately put them into production. While this quantity over quality approach to filmmaking led to many works of questionable quality, one thing was certain: Canon was making money, and it was only a matter of time before one particularly hot property fell into their pipeline: the first official film adaptation of Spider-Man. In the early 80s, the rights to the Spider-Man film belonged to Orion Pictures, who hired legendary schlockmaster Roger Corman to produce the film. The option was brief, however, as budgetary disagreements constantly delayed the film. Orion's rights to the project eventually expired, and the Canon Group snatched up the film rights to Spider-Man. With dollar signs and a potential cash cow in their pocket, and no knowledge of comic books whatsoever, Spider-Man immediately went into development as a horror movie. While Golan and Globus knew Spider-Man would be a huge hit, they knew absolutely nothing about the character. Nothing. They didn't even know Spider-Man was a superhero and believed him to be, in fact, a monster. Much like the Wolfman or Cronenberg's The Fly, the pair saw Spider-Man as more of a man-spider creature feature and enlisted veteran horror director Tobe Hooper to helm their misconceived project. Hooper had set up shop at Canon, prepping both Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 and the remake of Invaders from Mars, and seemed perfect for Canon's version of our beloved webhead. The treatment, written by Outer Limits creator Leslie Stevens, was a far cry from the Spider-Man we all know and love. In Canon's first version of the script, Peter Parker is an ID badge photographer who is used as a test subject in a horrific science experiment, thus turning him into a monstrous half-human, half-spider. When a mad scientist aims to create millions of these spider people to take over the world, it's up to good old Mr. Parker, the only spider mutant with a heart, to save the day in an epic, low-budget, rubber monster-suited extravaganza. Not surprisingly, Marvel and Stan Lee hated the idea and pushed heavily for the studio to return the character to his roots. They listened. The new script was written, and Canon's Spider-Man was revised as that friendly neighborhood something or other that comic book fans would find a lot more familiar. Uninterested in directing a traditional superhero movie, Tobe Hooper left the project, leaving Golan and Globus in search of a new, more action-oriented director. And find one they did. Enter Joe Zito, an experienced action director who helmed such Canon classics as Missing in Action, starring Chuck Norris, and Invasion USA, also starring Chuck Norris. Zito was no stranger to big explosions on a modest budget, and seemed like a natural choice to bring the web-slinging superhero to life. With a director attached, pre-production was officially underway for Canon's latest and most ambitious project, Spider-Man the Movie. The previous script was canned and rewritten in favor of a more traditional take on Marvel's top character. Peter Parker was set to save the city from the infamous Dr. Octopus, with many of Spider-Man's supporting players in tow. With a new director and script locked down, casting choices were underway. Bob Hoskins was the frontrunner to play the villainous Doc Ock, while legendary screen actress Lauren Bacall was eyed for the role of Aunt May. For the part of Daily Bugle editor J. Jonah Jameson, Stan Lee had one particular choice in mind: himself. As far as the title role of Peter Parker, Canon's top choice was clear in the form of Tinseltown's biggest up-and-coming actor. That's right, the studio wanted none other than Tom Cruise. And who they got was Scott Leva. Scott Leva was an accomplished stunt performer, actor, and fight coordinator. He had portrayed Spider-Man in a variety of print ads, live appearances, and even played the character in Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. Perhaps most notable was Leva's appearance as an unmasked Peter Parker on the infamous photo cover of Amazing Spider-Man number 262 in 1985. In typical Canon fashion, it was the producer's goal to sell theatrical and video distribution rights before cameras even started rolling. To do this, Canon sparked interest in the project using marketing materials, such as a revealing 50-page pullout ad, concept art, and even a short teaser trailer.
Within this unsuspecting city, history's greatest experiment creates tomorrow's greatest superhero. Spider-Man, the movie. A live-action spectacular directed by Joe Zito, based on the characters created by Stan Lee.
With all the pieces in place, it seemed like nothing could stop Spider-Man the movie from swinging its way to the big screen, right? Wrong. Unfortunately, Spider-Man was no match for the combined powers of both Superman and He-Man. In 1986, Canon had purchased the rights to the ailing Superman franchise and produced the sequel Superman 4: The Quest for Peace for a budget of $17 million, a hefty price tag for Canon, who were already in a slew of financial troubles at the time. In addition, the studio produced a live-action adaptation of the hit toy line and cartoon Masters of the Universe, with a budget of $22 million. Both films were derided by critics and were massive box office failures. By then, it was no secret that Canon was hemorrhaging money, and to help recoup their losses, the producers slashed the budget for Spider-Man considerably. Plagued by developmental troubles and major script changes to appease a dwindling budget, the writing was on the wall. Spider-Man, the movie, was dying. With his vision of the film now compromised, Joe Zito was out, and Canon workhorse / B-movie maverick Albert Pyun was in. Pyun, having worked on such bargain basement classics as Sword and the Sorcerer and the action thriller Dangerously Close, was a master at delivering as much action for as little money as possible. Pyun's mission for Canon was to shoot both Spider-Man and the sequels to Masters of the Universe at the same time, using the same sets and costumes in one big back-to-back production. This was designed to utilize both Canon's rapidly depleting finances and make the most of Pyun's time as director, theoretically churning out 2 hit movies to compensate the studio's losses. Sets were constructed and costumes were made, and Pyun's plan seemed easy enough. He would shoot the early Peter Parker stages of the Spider-Man movie first. Pyun would then pause production on Spidey and shoot all of Masters of the Universe 2, in which He-Man would come back to Earth disguised as a football quarterback. This presumably would give the Spider-Man actor time to bulk up to superhero proportions. Once Masters of the Universe 2 wrapped, Pyun would resume shooting Canon's Spider-Man movie, thus completing 2 major franchise films for the studio in one fell swoop. But alas, it was not meant to be. Unable to recover from their many financial crises, the Canon Group was sold, and pre-production on Spider-Man the movie was shut down. Galan and Globus went their separate ways, with Globus remaining with Canon's new owner, and Galan starting 21st Century Film Corp. Peter Parker and co. were stranded in development hell after spending millions on the project. For the next several years, the rights to bring the web-headed hero to the big screen would end up in litigation, with Canon library owner MGM, 21st Century Film Corp., and James Cameron and Coralco, among others, claiming their stake in Spider-Man's movie rights. After years of legal battles, it was Columbia Pictures who emerged victorious. A new director was chosen in the form of Evil Dead visionary Sam Raimi, and finally, after over a decade of failed attempts, the film went into production. On May 3, 2002, much to the delight of critics and fans, Spider-Man made his way into cinemas everywhere. And the rest is history. In the end, it all webbed up nicely. While Roger Corman's company never made a Spider-Man movie, his contribution to the Marvel world did come to light in the form of the very first, and still unreleased, Fantastic Four movie. Director Tobe Hooper may not have added giant mutant man-spider to his resume, but his filmography is legendary, and with such classics as Poltergeist and Texas Chainsaw Massacre under his name, Hooper is regarded as one of the greatest directors in the horror genre. Scott Leva went on to a successful career as an award-winning stuntman, putting the super in many a superhero. And while he didn't star in a Spider-Man film per se, he did make an unexpected cameo on the set of the original X-Men movie.
Wait! I am completely in the wrong movie. I am
Joe Zito, despite his ill-fated ties to Spider-Man, went on to become an accomplished cult action director, with such hits as Delta Force 1, The Lost Patrol, starring Chuck Norris' son, Mike Norris, and Red Scorpion, the movie Dolph Lundgren chose to star in instead of that He-Man football sequel. And speaking of He-Man, director Albert Pyun was still left with perfectly good sets and costumes to be used in the Masters of the Universe and Spider-Man movies. With both projects dead in the water, Pyun still managed to put those sets to good use, in the form of Canon's Jean-Claude Van Damme classic, Cyborg. And even though he didn't get to shoot Spider-Man, Pyun did go on to direct the 1990 film Captain America for 21st Century Film Corp and producer Menahem Golan.
Thanks.
And as for Spider-Man, he went on to become one of cinema's biggest box office properties, bringing in billions of dollars worldwide. Still, considering all of Spider-Man's critical acclaim and box office success, audiences should hold a special place in their hearts for the little studio that could, and their little superhero movie that didn't, but could have, started it all.